Good evening, everybody. This is Andrew Cooperrider with another episode of Fresh Brewed Kentucky Politics. We might be cutting these down to just like 3 days a week with the legislation coming out of session, but we still have a lot of news always going on, of course, to cover with you guys. And I'm very excited to have you guys with me. But first, I do have to ask you to please hit the share button. Share this out. Share it multiple places if you want to. Get the word out. I think, and if somebody else finds another one, please drop it in the comments and let us know that it exists, because I can't find it. Another true conservative, liberty, Kentucky politics style podcast. I don't know of another one. If you know of one, drop it in the links there, because I would be personally curious to listen to it. I'd be curious to hear what they're talking about out there. But as always, guys, please support us. Shop.brewedco.com, donate.brewedco.com. Come by the coffee shop there. It's a great cup of coffee. Everybody loves it that comes and tries it, and those people who don't like it are probably communists. So there you go. They don't like their coffee too strong, I guess. Anyways, I'm just joking. People may not like our coffee, and that's okay. That doesn't mean they're communists. But welcome, everybody. We'll dive right into it here. And I wanted to kick off. The other night, I was at an event with the speaker, and he's talking kind of about creating two parallel societies and talking about kind of that going. And well before COVID, I think we can say that we were headed towards some parallel societies already. And what I mean by that is before COVID even kicked off, we had Discover Card cutting you off from being able to transact on certain sites or give to certain people's legal defense funds. I know that they were doing that. I know that, of course, we had GoFundMe deplatformings. We had a lot of deplatformings going on prior to COVID, prompting alternative social media sites like Parler, like MeWe to come out and be in existence there. But what we're seeing is, I think COVID has really sped it up in this way, because what we're seeing is almost a creation of two societies. And what I'm starting to see it on is almost the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. I'll give you an example here. I've been seeing tweets and pictures of signs of outside of restaurants, probably not around Kentucky, but out in, places like California, things like that, with restaurants putting signs out front that say, or probably not California because they don't do indoor dining, but restaurants putting signs out front that say, you can't come in unless you've had the vaccine. You can't do indoor dining unless you've had the vaccine. In fact, here in Kentucky, we got a message today from an individual telling us that their daughter's college graduation from a private college required them to either show proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. And I know you're like, well, that sounds pretty reasonable. However, if you're like me, personally, I don't like going to get COVID tested a whole lot, because we've all heard their stories and the numbers and how it gets thrown in there. So there are people who may have some issues even getting tested for COVID in the first place. They may have an issue with even doing that. But yet to require it, I know that there was some points where somebody I know was looking at traveling to different countries, and they required COVID tests to be able to get on the planes and fly and whatnot. And though I understand that response, what I don't understand is sometimes people just don't want to be able to take it. And also, I think there's a backup response to that, kind of get to in a second. But more importantly, what we're seeing is almost a creation of two societies, because though SB 8 says the government can't require vaccinations, there's still ways that employers can require vaccinations. In fact, take, for example, teachers here in Kentucky. If you don't take the vaccination that they offer you, you can't get 2 weeks COVID quarantine pay. That is where if you have to be quarantined for 2 weeks because you get exposed to COVID. Now, understand that doesn't mean you necessarily tested positive for COVID. Everybody knows the CDC guidelines there. What that means is you could have just been around somebody who tested positive for COVID, and in fact, they have entire classrooms that are on quarantine. And so in turn, now I'm pretty sure those classrooms flip over to doing NTI. And I was actually talking to one of our state senators the other night. And I said, with HB 208 requiring that that classrooms and schools be open at least 2 out of 5 days a week. How are schools like Fayette County schools getting away with putting an entire classroom on quarantine for 2 weeks? Because clearly they're not in session. And this legislator said, well, nowhere in the bill did it say that the entire school has to be in session. And so that's an example where we talked about HB 208 won't keep the kids in school. That's a perfect example where we're seeing kids out on quote-unquote quarantines, regardless of if you have a positive or negative COVID test, regardless of if you've been vaccinated. Because remember, those teachers are getting vaccinated, having to go on quarantine. And the reason why that's important to talk about, and I'll kind of get to there in a second, but basically we're creating these parallel societies. But not only that, we're creating these parallel societies that appears to be based upon some real misinformation being pushed out there by the government. And what do I mean by misinformation per se? And it's not exactly misinformation, but two things don't link up with the other. For an example, the CDC will come out and say, if you've been vaccinated, if you're in a room with somebody who's had COVID and they test positive for COVID, you don't even have to worry about quarantining or getting tested. Don't worry about it. You probably don't have COVID. But on the same token, on the flip side though, they sit there and they say, oh, we can't get rid of masks. And remember, the whole reason masks are in there is because you might have COVID and not know it, right? The whole reason why they say I need to be mandated to wear a mask is because it affects others, not just myself. And yet I get my own personal choice, but I can't affect others. That is the argument we've always heard. But the question is if you're vaccinated, and that means you don't have to worry about getting COVID or infecting others once you've been vaccinated, why are we still requiring a mask? And in fact, Fauci himself didn't disagree that once you've been vaccinated, you can't spread it. What he said when him and Paul were going at it was that, well, there may be variants out there or something like that. And that's a never-ending game. There's no endpoint to that. Of course, there may be variants. We're seeing one maybe popping up here in Kentucky. But he's sitting there saying no, and at the same time, we have government entities coming out and people in there saying, well, honestly, people who've been vaccinated don't have to wear a mask, but if we come out and say that, mask mandates will be repealed, and there's no well and perfect way that we can maintain and make sure the people who haven't been vaccinated are staying masked if we don't have a mask mandate in place, because basically we'd have to verify everybody's been vaccinated or not. But also as well, what they don't talk about, and I think it's worth speaking about, is that if I've already had COVID, so you all know, we've talked about it before that if anybody's had COVID in this country, I'm sure I probably have, I don't know. But if anybody's had, if you've had COVID and you test positive for the antibodies, do you have to get vaccinated? Do you have to wear a mask? Do you have an immunity? And yet the science, they say it's out or it's possible. But as we posted on our Facebook, there has only been under 50 confirmed reinfection cases in the entire country out of the millions upon millions upon millions of COVID cases of confirmed reinfections of COVID. In fact, there has been more people who've been infected by percentage and I think by raw numbers that have been vaccinated that then got COVID than there has been from people that have gotten COVID and then had a confirmed reinfection. So, in fact, though they sit there and pretend that getting the virus doesn't provide you an immunity, the data isn't playing that out. The data clearly states that getting the virus clearly gives you an immunity that by percentage might even be stronger than the vaccine. But yet you can't walk around with you've got to either A, wear a mask, or B, you got to be vaccinated. And that's a concern too. If they do come out and start saying, well, if you've been vaccinated, you show proof of your vaccination, maybe, I don't know, get yourself a little something. And if you're not been vaccinated, you need to wear a mask. Now we're creating a physical distinction between the two societies, between the two bodies. Because we have employers that say maybe you need vaccinated and maybe you don't. That creates a set of employers that if you're somebody who doesn't want to get vaccinated, you have to work for. And there's a set of places you now can go. And it really creates two parallel economies. And that's, I think, is a real danger. And that's more so, they talk about bringing the country together. I think that's dividing the country more. And if we came out and just said, listen, if you've had COVID, yeah, you're probably immune. Get vaccinated if you want to. Oh, but you can sit in a room, and if somebody's been tested for COVID, you don't have to worry about it. But at the same time, if you don't get vaccinated, you may be hurting other people. That has been one of the conversational points people have made. They've said, you need to go get vaccinated. Why? Well, you might hurt other people. Same reason why you got to wear a mask. Now, first off, we all know I'm not responsible for another person's safety. Nobody's responsible for your safety but yourself. Because to require something of someone else for you to survive is requiring that person to slavery, is requiring that person to engage with you in a requirement that you have not willingly engaged in. Right? When you have a child, you willingly engaged in making and having that child. That is you engaging in the contract saying you'll take care of that child. But you don't have that. You don't get the ability to look at perfect strangers down the street and tell them they're responsible for you. That isn't how it works in America. Just isn't how it works. So we have a mix of them saying a lot of mixed information on vaccines, about not so much mixed information, but half truths, where they recognize, if you get vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask, but it's hard to control people. Or you have, maybe you can be reinfected. I don't know, take the vaccine, when actually less people have gotten COVID that have been, out of the millions have gotten COVID, have been reinfected than you've seen with vaccines. So they don't even offer that. They don't even say vaccinated, show proof that you've had COVID and are over it, or negative COVID test. That's not even an offer. It's vaccine or negative COVID test. That's it. It's a way of getting society, it's a way of requiring vaccines without having to require them. And listen, you can have your own opinions about vaccines. I say if you look at the data and you look at everything, you want to take it, then you take it. If you don't want to, then don't take it. And you shouldn't be required to put something in you don't want to put in you, just so somebody else feels safe. If I look at the data and I say, you know what, in the state of Kentucky, there's only been 3 deaths under 30. Geez, I'm not going to take it. That's my prerogative. That's my decision to make. And for you to sit there and say that's the wrong decision or that's the bad decision, and then to sit there and say you can't go somewhere for this or that, or you can't go to these places, that's wrong. Now listen, they're private companies. They're absolutely allowed to make their own decisions. I have no problem if that private company wants to say, private companies can say only women can come in if it's a women's gym, or only men if it's a men's gym, right? I have no problem with private companies doing their own thing. The problem is you have these government actors and the media engaging in a misinformation where if anybody's even halfway, just go to the CDC site, read the information they give you on things, and then watch the news. You'll see they do not line up. They just don't. And these are the experts, right? You have, here in Kentucky, 25 per 100,000 red zone, but nationally, 100 per 100,000 red zone. Those don't line up, yet nobody asks the questions. It's not about paying. You don't even got to pay super attention. You don't got to be a conspiracy theorist or anything else. I don't think it's necessarily a conspiracy. I think it's the same situation that Fauci found himself in when they first talked about masks. When they said, well, why'd you change your mind on masks? Now, he didn't come out and say this, and whether or not this is true, I don't know, but he said the reason why he didn't say to wear a mask initially was because he was worried people would suddenly make a rush on buying masks and then wouldn't leave any for the hospitals. So Fauci admitted he lied to control us. He then again admitted he lied about the number. He keeps moving the amount of people that would have to get infected to create herd immunity. He keeps moving the goalposts farther and farther out for control reasons. He admitted it. These are things he's admitted to doing. And I'm not saying that it necessarily has to be a conspiracy. What I'm saying is the road to evil is paved with good intentions, right? He's got good intentions, I'm sure. But he also has a vested interest, and he's specialized in one thing. And the question is that, from an epidemiology standpoint, for all diseases, it'd be better if everybody walked around socially distanced, constantly wore a mask all the time and everything else. But from a realistic life standpoint, that's just not possible. And you're actually creating a greater and greater divide in this country when you're creating these parallel societies. I mean, let's take a look at masking. The CDC comes out with their own study. saying masking only led to a 2% increase or decrease, depending on how you look at it. So they looked at states that had a mask mandate, states that didn't. And listen, when mask mandates first came out, I wore a mask. I wore a mask for a little while there. And then we didn't see cases decreasing. And then people started asking, why aren't cases decreasing? And their response was, well, that's because people are not wearing their masks. I said, well, that's not true. I just know that's not true. I go to stores, everything else. I see people wearing masks all the time. What are you talking about? People aren't wearing a mask. And that was always the story. People aren't wearing a mask. So the CDC comes out and says, listen, there's only a 2% difference in death rates between places that wore masks and didn't in their growth rates. In order to even achieve a noticeable difference, they had to go 100 days out from the point where it was required or not required. It is clear that masking is just not really this end-all, be-all, but yet they sold it as that because, of course, it plays into, I think initially they sold it as that because they need to open back up the economy, at least Trump was certainly pushing for it. They said, how can we open it up safely? And Fauci comes out and says, okay, well, if we wear masks, that makes them feel more comfortable where they can go out and it'll provide some protection. CDC themselves says, that didn't really lead to a lot, neither does restaurants, because, of course, the main source of COVID infections is from within your own home, based on their own numbers, and you can't stop that from happening. But despite the evidence, despite what their own statements are on their website, we see the media and we see them pushing these conflicting things, and then we're looked at as the crazy ones when we say those things are conflicting, maybe they're not right. We're looked at as the crazy ones. I don't know. It's interesting. Anyways, talking here locally too, our wonderful king and ruler, God save the king, Andy Bashir, has graciously allowed us to now remain open. We can serve till 12, remain open till 1 a.m. There you go. And as we posted the other day, if you don't see this as clearly about control, I don't know what to tell you. It clearly is. At this point, if you're pushing back a curfew, only 1 hour, and you're talking a midnight, a 1 a.m. level thing here, you're talking a curfew that's that late. Why even have one at all? Like, why even have one at all? Not only that, but are you saying Kentucky grew from being a high schooler to a college student, but we still live at mom's house? I mean, is that what you're saying now? Now, kids, you can just imagine Andy Bashir sitting there saying, now, kids, you can go out, but you got to be home by 1:15. So I'm going to tell all the restaurants to close at 1 because I want you back home. I mean, ask yourself, right? Where are all the deaths occurring older than 55? I'd love to see the data that shows these curfews help at all. In fact, they don't. In fact, I've seen data that says the exact opposite because if masking and indoor dining respectively both only accounted for a 2% and a 3.2% decrease or increase in growth rates, depending if they were put in place or not. I would love to see what curfews have effect. I don't think they do at all. I was reading several articles about it before I came on here. They don't at all. They are literally just a theater to say, I'm doing something. But the fact that you had to ask him permission of how late you can stay open keeps it going. It keeps the power in place. It keeps him going on TV every day. Because at a certain point, we just had to recognize maybe people die, maybe people don't. But what does the bars have to be closed by 1 a.m. have to do with saving grandma from COVID? They say, well, she might take it home to COVID. Listen, I don't think that person who goes out at 1 a.m. and is drinking a whole lot on the weekends and everything else is seeing grandma all that often. I could be wrong. But I'd love to see that data. But, of course, I don't think it exists. On top of that, they dumped another 600 deaths, 400 likely, 200 probable after examining COVID death certificates into our numbers count. They were already having a difference of opinion with the CDC. In fact, the CDC reflects this with no deaths under 20. Meanwhile, the state counts have us with the CDC has a 0 under 20, but the state counts have us at a 2-3 under 20. But yet they just did another dump. 400 deaths just found out of nowhere. It leads me to ask two questions. One, how did you miss, 600 deaths. How did you miss 600 deaths? Right? What's either A, something's wrong and you're incompetent in your reporting system to miss 600 deaths. And for those who think, well, 600, that's a pretty reasonable number. No, I mean, before this, we had 4,800. So that upped us by 15%. So right now, 15% of the deaths in this state count were just dropped on us because they were just missing. Not only that, but if I'm sitting there and I'm the governor and I'm trying to create a attitude and a society of acceptance, of trust, I don't suddenly drop 15% of the deaths out of nowhere. What better way to create suspicious behavior and people to not trust you than out of nowhere to come up with this new data and throw it in there? A significant amount of data. So either A, you're lying, B, you're incompetent and can't keep track of your records to the tune of 15, 20% of COVID deaths. And more importantly, C, you're not fostering a place of trust. And then you turn around and say, hey, trust the experts. You can't even count your numbers right. Why would we trust you? You supposedly just left off 600 deaths. Hey, trust us experts. We know what we're doing. We know our data. Oh, by the way, we forgot about these 600 people in this state that died from COVID. We're going to increase our numbers by 15%. That's insane. That doesn't create a state that trusts you at all. And then you wonder why we think it's about power. And you wonder why we don't trust anything that comes out of your mouth. And you wonder why we ask for the information. One of the things we actually, I didn't know if the impeachment would succeed or not, but one of the things I was hoping to see was to provide an opportunity for the impeachment committee to actually ask the governor for the data, for the studies, for the transcripts from the meetings, from the information to go into it. Right? I think we the people, if we have a transparent government, if I'm the governor and I'm trying to create goodwill and transparency, I want to see the minutes from the meetings you have where you discuss we're going to lay off 1.2 million people. I think that's a reasonable ask. But yet if I'm asking for that, I'm the crazy one. I'm not taking it serious enough. I'm putting profits over people because I want to see why you decided to lay off 1.2 million people. Doesn't make any sense to me. Been hearing some gas tax ads coming out these last 2 days of session. They'll probably try to pass a gas tax on us. One of them has the potential to increase our gas tax by 40% right off the rip. Of course, when you're in economic recovery is the time I want to raise our gas tax. That's 508 and 561, I do believe, HBs. 508 and HB 561. If I were you, I'd call your legislators, just tell them no, tell them you're aware of it. I'm not guaranteeing you that means they don't pass it, but what I'm guaranteeing you is that means they know you're paying attention. And they know you're paying attention, and that's important. And they need to know you're paying attention. And you're not going to fall for it when they pretend they really controlled the governor. I heard the Republican Party, I got the emails, I don't know about you guys, got some emails about how they're claiming victory this legislative session, and for the fact that they think they've done anything to claim victory on yet this legislative session, we'll see what shakes out. There's only a few bills that they really can have any small amount of positivity on, but we'll see. They'll see if they can overcome the veto on school choice. We'll see if they, once they finally pass SB 8, if it gets denied. We'll see what happens in the courts, but it looks like the cases that myself and Richard from Beans with the lawyer Chris are bringing up in Northern Kentucky is doing more to open up this state off of the laws passed HB 1, SB 1, and SB 2 than the legislators are pushing for. Because if they really wanted to, they could have passed quite a lot of laws to make it harder and harder for the governor to control us, but they didn't. They could have passed many more bills, but they didn't. They've been a big disappointment. That's okay. We can address this. We at least know who they are. And if you want to know the answers, come out to April 17th's event. We're going to be going over how this happens, what we do to respond, how we take care of it, how do we keep people on the straight and narrow of liberty once they're in there. That's what we'll cover on April 17th. But it's for people who want to get involved. But we have to sit there and they're going to try to pass this gas tax. So at least give them a call. Let them know, don't do it. We're paying attention. If you want to put salt in the wound, but like I said, Republican Party sent out donate to us emails because they reined in the governor. Don't donate to them. Save your money. Donate it to candidates. I challenge each of you out there to donate to more than one candidate in the primary this in 2022. Save up your money. Put it in a special account. Try to max out to somebody. 2,000 is the max out. See if you can save up to max out to somebody running in 2022. We also have some cancel culture rearing its head of sorts, while meanwhile, we're not exactly seeing the same standard on the other side. First, we've got Goodwood also bringing their lawsuit, coming under attack. The Blue Backers in Franklin County, is meeting out there, I believe, Saturday at 2. I'll be at Take Back Kentucky, but they're meeting out there at Goodwood and Frankfort Saturday at 2. If you're in the area, go ahead, check that out. Show some support. But the cancel culture also rearing its head here. Of course, we've dealt with our own forms of cancellations, being kicked off of industry things, being removed off sites, our own form of cancellations. But what's funny is that what we don't see is any slight of the same treatment for the other side. I'll give you an example, and I was talking to my friend, an attorney, Chris Weiss, about this today, and he gave me a wonderful line, which I'm sure is probably not his. If he thought of it himself, I'd be shocked, but he said the only standard the left has is no standards, which I think is hilariously true. Or I'm sorry, the only standard the left has is a double standard, which I think is hilariously true. And so that brings us to, and it's been flying over social media, and a lot of people have been reporting this individual to Fayette County Schools, and I would be too. And that is from Nima Brewer. Nima Brewer is the grassroots founder of 120 Strong. That is the teachers union's grassroots. She's employed by Fayette County Public Schools as an activist. I don't believe she's a teacher. I think she's like a secretary that gets paid somehow like almost $100,000 a year or over $100,000 a year. Anyways, she had posted a tweet that says, "I would love to see good education reporters rummaging the panty drawers of these independent districts. Let's see how their finances are and figured out if they overspend on new facilities, just saying." Now just take that tweet on its own for a second. Fayette County Public Schools dropped $20,000 alone on lobbying this year, just Fayette County Public Schools lobbying this year up in Frankfort. Not to mention, Nima herself is paid far too much for what she does. Maybe we should be auditing your job, Nima, and see if you're paid way too much for what you do, because I have a feeling you are. I have a feeling we can find somebody to do it for half that amount of money and still be very happy, and then not be posting this as a follow-up. She says, if we're going to start cutting throats, then sign me up. Imagine if you or I had said that, if you're on the right side of things. Imagine you had said, if we're going to start cutting throats, sign me up. Do you think we would still have our jobs if we worked for the government the next day? Shoot, Brood, just by existing, if I worked for somebody else, I'm sure they would have tried to have gotten me fired by now. But yet here we have a Fayette County school employee saying, let's start cutting throats, and as far as I know, getting a pass. I know a lot of people have been reporting her in to the school board, to the Fayette County Public Schools ethics, to let them know, hey, you've got somebody out there posting terroristic threats online. And she should be reported for it. That's not okay. You shouldn't be out there having some sort of say-so or point into my child's education. My kid goes to Fayette County Schools while saying you want to slit people's throats. That's quite ridiculous, don't you think? But yet, she won't be canceled. No, she probably won't even get a disciplinary action for it. No matter how many people report her, hundreds of people can report her. She probably still wouldn't do it. In fact, I'd love to see 100 people call in and say that the Nima Brewer on Twitter said, I mean, if we're going to start cutting throats, then sign me up. Threatening people online. And see what they say. But no, trust me, if I'd said that, it'd be all over. It'd be all over the place. But, like I said, as Chris Weiss said to me today, the only standard the left has is a double standard. And that's the difference. Is that, as this cancel culture goes on and companies like Brood and Goodwood and Beans, and we come under constant attacks, constant threats of cancellation, all that does is push us into it more. The only reason we're so far into politics is because we have to fight on the cancel culture. I'm in the middle of Lexington. I'm in a blue area. I've got to push back on it. And I'm not afraid to lose as much on it because, quite frankly, I would have already lost everything if I was to be able to be in that area. I'm sorry, if I would have already lost everything if I didn't stand up. But instead, here I am. So support Goodwood, support other companies standing up and fighting. Because we try to be canceled unlike the others. That being said, guys, share this out. Once again, support us. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you, I think, Monday. We'll see you Monday there for the next one. Thanks.